All right, let's begin the shading. But before we get into it earnestly, let's talk about this. So this is a 5-step value scale chart. This is also posted on Canvas. Why I am showing you this is to demonstrate the general 5-step process that we are going to follow. 1 is white, 5 is black. The media we're using, graphite, for the first area here is not, it won't achieve that blackness, right? So we're gonna have to think of this as our black is a little bit more like a really dark gray, something like right around in here. That said, our 4 will be a bit lighter than presented here. Our 3 will be a bit lighter. Our 2 will be a bit lighter as well. The other media, we'll use the ink and the tempera paint. They will meet this level of blackness, okay? So let's discuss graphite. Okay, so we're gonna begin. You should have these pencils in your pencil box. If not, we will set them up before you begin. All right, so we're gonna work with a variety of pencils, and we've discussed the hardnesses and softnesses and in class. And so let's just review real quick. So H will be our lightest pencil. It's the hardest graphite that we have. This is good for precise lines and for making lighter marks. The next softest will be the B. I'm sorry, no, HB. So HB is, if we take H is hard and B is soft, this is like hard soft. So an HB pencil is what we think of as a number 2 pencil in the US system. The next will be B. The next softest is 2B, 4B, and 6B. Now, I will have you, if you haven't done so already, we'll practice with these, just making some marks to see and test how it feels. Right, so begin with the pencil you think is going to work best. The strategy I would think about when tackling these value scales is think of 1 as white, that'll be the white of your paper, and 5 is as dark as our graphite can go. So I would naturally probably go with a 4B or 6B here. And we can start with that first if you like. If we want to start with 5, we can with the 6B or 4B. Just be careful you're not smudging your hand through it. All right, so one thing we can do too is we can use a scrap piece of paper when we're shading. And so if I do work in an area where there's a lot of graphite, I can simply cover it. So after we shade our 5 box here, we're gonna start down here actually, I can just cover that so I'm not running my hand through it. It's always a good idea to keep a piece of scrap paper under your hand. All right, so let's start with a 4B first. Oh, that needs to be sharpened. So a looping line is what we're gonna use first. I'm gonna use this little scrap paper. The way we're going to make smooth shading is by using a looping line. I really would like to get a little closer with the camera, but this will work. So you can see I'm starting light. Obviously this is not as dark as what we need to go, but I'm just showing you lightly first. I want you to work up to the values rather than just starting super dark right away. So I'm gonna show you this real close here. So you can see that that's not focusing very well, huh? The line is looping, so it's just obliterating itself. So I don't see marks, and it's a little rough. I can do better than that. But this is the technique. We're gonna use a looping line. We're not going to blend with our fingers or with a blending stump. Do not smudge it with your fingers, please. All right, so start in here. We're gonna, not the top row, the bottom row. So start with this, and you're gonna shade the box. Now, for time's sake, I'm just gonna do a small portion, and then I'll stop the video, and I'll show you the completed box. So you can see I'm using a looping line. I'm gonna start by going close to the edges first with straight lines, but I'm gonna slowly fill it in. So you can see the 4B is pretty dark. I'm not pushing super hard. All right, so here's the completed box. Ooh, it's really shiny, huh? when we compare, you can see it's pretty close actually. It's a little bit lighter. All right, so now I'm gonna label this. I'm gonna use my H pencil or HB. I'm gonna label this 5 underneath, okay? 4, 3, 2, 1. 1 is white, don't have to do anything there. So for the number 4, it's a bit lighter. It's a good, significant step lighter. Since our 5 was pretty close to that darkness, we can be pretty close to this 4. Maybe we can start with a 2B on this one, okay? We're gonna back up a bit so it's not too dark. Again, we're gonna use a looping line, all right? Now, one thing too, this pencil's kind of sharp and it should be a little more graphite showing. You have little sandpaper pads either in your box or in where it says share like an artist, the drawing supplies cabinet. You can kind of just for the side of it, you can kind of dull the pencil a bit. Don't grind it away. But this is just going to make a flatter, broader edge, which will give you more surface area and give you a softer mark. All right, so I'm looking where I sanded it, and now I'm going to use a looping line again. Not too dark. You can build up to the darks, right? The looping line, you can turn your paper. The looping line is obliterating the marks I'm making. So if I go one direction, then I can go other direction. That kind of softens them out. See how that works? All right, so I'm gonna stop the video here, show you the finished. I am just about finished with the number 4 here, value 4. Just finding little inconsistent areas. All right, so pretty reflective. It's a step lighter than 5. Let's see if I compare it to my model. It's fairly similar to the one I have, maybe just a touch lighter. Now, when I look at my paper and I'm looking at it in my phone, it looks darker on the phone than in real life. I swear. Yeah, so anyway, what's important is the relative spacing between each box. So if here's my 5 and here's my 4, that jump between these two is pretty close to these two. Even though my 5 looks darker in the camera than it does in real life. All right, so I decided to show you this a little early. So what I found was the paper has some tooth to it, meaning it's kind of rough. So you might find that as you're shading, a lot of the white of the paper is kind of coming through. And it might, if that happens, you can go switch to a harder pencil, like go to H, and since it's a harder graphite, you can kind of push a little harder and it'll get into those little valleys. I did go a little too dark with 2, and I ended up needing to lighten it, and I still need to lighten it a bit. You can use this kneaded eraser, and you can shape it to the size you want. I'm just gonna tamp, just kind of touch very lightly. You can kind of hear it sticking a little bit. Very lightly. Don't push too hard or rub too hard because you're gonna lift it all off and then you're gonna fix it. All right, so it's a little uneven. I'm gonna go in and smooth it out, but it's just getting close. All right, so I ended up using, just to recap here, 4B and 6B. Then I used a 2B and 4B. So just cycle down the grades of pencil, okay? The 3, I used a 2B and a B and also an H, just to get in some of the little valleys there. Number 2, I used an H and a B. Number 1, you leave alone. I'm gonna fix up number 2. We'll just finish this part of the value scales, and we'll talk about the top in the next video. Okay, so I finished this row up on the bottom. We're gonna talk about this. Here our example. This guy, there's an even gradation at this top here, okay? So we're gonna try to achieve this even gradation from light to dark. It's probably better to work light to dark. I can always make it darker. It's difficult to make it lighter. You're gonna have to use an eraser, your kneaded eraser, and lift it up. And that is not, it's a blunt tool. It's just gonna kind of mess things up a bit. So then you're gonna have to fix it. So it's always easier to work up to the values. Like I keep saying, build up to the darks that you are wanting, okay? So from 1 here, you can see the distance between 1 and 2. There's a gradation. So it's kind of white here at the edge, and then it slowly turns a light gray to a value of 2, which is similar to this whole entire box out by the edge. So let's look at how to do that. All right. To begin, so I know I want it pretty light out here, right? And it's gonna get darker as I move to 2. So maybe not do too much here, maybe just let I'm holding the pencil way far back. I'm using kind of a long looping line. I'm just gonna lightly scumble, which is kind of dragging the pencil over the paper, barely pushing, okay? So go out to the edge, turn it the other way. Try not to put too much graphite out here. You can lift it up with the kneaded eraser, and it's so light it's not that big a deal, but let's learn control, okay? I'm gonna move out to the 2 box. Just really quickly blocking it in. Now I have some dark lines here. Let's erase those. Hands might be getting dirty. So this is where you can put a piece of paper down underneath your hand too, especially if I'm putting my hand here. I'm gonna stick it right on top of that dark spot. So let's get a little scrap paper here. You can get a piece of newsprint from the drawer, or there's scrap paper on the black table out by the sinks. So I'm just gonna cover that when I'm working here. So now I can move my hand around and it won't smudge. All right, to continue, looping light, scumbly kind of mark. You can slowly build it up. So this gray here should be about here and gets slightly lighter as it moves out. It's gonna take a little bit. So the H pencil is very hard, and it's gonna be a little harder to make a smooth mark because you can sand it down a bit, make a flatter edge, gives you more surface area, and it will be less scratchy lines when you're shading. Again, don't sand your pencil away. You can also just run it on a piece of paper like this. I'm pushing kind of hard, you can see that'll flatten your tip out a little bit too and smooth it. And this is not a fast thing, so I'm gonna stop it and show you what it looks like when it's finished. Okay, so I completed this. It's a little reflective. In doing this, you may want to think about the left side of each value in here as a little bit lighter than the average. So if, for instance, let's say for number 4, this is a uniform box. You can make the top side of 4, make this a little bit lighter than what 4 is. So the back, say like 3rd, should be just slightly lighter than the next, and that will help you create an even gradation. Interestingly, on this thing, when I printed it out, I don't know if you can see on the camera or not, you could kind of see some banding in this, and in some ways it's kind of helpful. Maybe I'll print some for you guys. To understand that stepping. So it's basically like making the boxes like here. These are separate and distinct. Just think of them as doing lots of smaller ones closer together. I did blend through too. I took my pencil, so I started at one end and then I kind of went through. And I ended up using, again, the same sorts of pencils, 4B, 6B, 2B, 4B, maybe a little 6B, and so on and so forth, bringing it down to the harder graphites as it got lighter. I did use a kneaded eraser to clean up some little things here and there, and I did use an eraser to clean up little edges just to kind of keep it nice and neat. Okay, so that is your soft shading. Again, the whole point of soft shading is to make it look nice and even and soft. All right, your turn.